miles per hour.
Oh. Hey everyone, welcome to the new video. I hope you're having a fantastic day whenever you're catching this. And this video is going to be for rehab and prevention of the PIP joint injury, PIP synovitis, and other inflammation of this joint on the finger. That middle knuckle could be middle finger, ring finger, pinky, index, most commonly ring finger, and second most commonly middle finger. This is not to be confused with the DIP joint, which is the one further out to the end. I have a video for that. That's very common in the middle finger and the other fingers, but middle finger DIP is probably the most common finger issue in disc golf. I would say ring finger PIP, further in one, which is what this video is pertaining to, is going to be probably the second most common. There's also ligaments in here that can get injured. So I have to say, this is not medical advice. I'm not a medical professional. This is just me sharing my experiences and the way I warm up and rehab these things for myself that's worked for me, and also what I've shared with people and gotten some good feedback, and also help and advice from other coaches and physical therapists, and so on and so forth. As always, I'll have video chapters so you can skip around to each respective section that you're interested in. And also, please do me a huge favor and subscribe. I'm going to be coming out with more stuff like this. And I got some other exciting videos coming soon for you guys on my course progression, my first tournament that I played in, and then interviews with Anthony Barella, maybe Eagle McMahon, as well as some on-course instructionals for throwing bombs through tight wooded fairways and all that kind of fun stuff. So the rehab protocol that you're doing 2 times per day, this is going to have a few benefits for the finger joint, the PIP joint, that you're having issues with. First of all, it's going to increase blood flow and increase the rate of tissue remodeling. So a lot of these connective tissues, they don't get a lot of blood flow, especially out in the extremities towards the tips of our body. So by doing low intensity, long duration exercises that have minimal negative impact on joints, we're still going to be working those tissues and stretching them, relieving that stretch, and that's going to help them soak up healing factors and undergoing collagen synthesis. The joint capsules, which is where the synovitis often happens, also for the PIP joint especially, respond pretty well to expansive exercises, which I'll show you guys. Conversely, the DIP joint, which I have the other video on, seems to respond better to compression. There's some other specifics to that, but regardless, this stuff is going to be like an antidote to the destruction that happens when we're throwing too hard or with technique that's aggravating the joints, pulling on the fingers too hard, so on and so forth. So the protocol itself, basically no equipment required. That was a big goal of mine, is making this convenient to do at your house. So all you're going to need is a doorway that you can hang your fingers on the top of the doorway, and then also that you can push into the middle of the doorway. We're going to be supersetting working the flexion component of the fingers with working the extension component of the fingers. Each flexion is going to be a 30-second ISO hold. Each extension is going to be a 20-second ISO hold. So within each superset, the first superset is going to be more of a straight finger, open hand hold, pulling down into the doorway. About 50% intensity. It's pretty easy, pretty light for 30 seconds. Superset that with the straight finger extension, pushing into the doorway for 20 seconds. Superset number 2 is going to be more curled fingers. We'll call it more of a pseudo half crimp in terms of rock climbing terms. Kind of this shape, pulling down into the top of the doorway for 30 seconds. Again, at about 50% intensity when you're starting out. And then you're supersetting that with slightly more curled in fingers, pushing against the doorway. And then rest up before the third and final superset. Third and final superset, you're going to be really coming in from the top with some pretty sharp flexed in fingers, pulling into the top of the doorway. This one can be higher intensity, 60, 70, maybe even 80% intensity if you're adapted for it. And this is going to be supersetted with more of the curled fingers pushed into the doorway, almost squeezing in and pushing forward at the same time. And that's going to be in the deepest joint flexion. I do want to mention before I forget, for this last superset, set 3, especially on the extension pushing into the doorway, go very, very light on these. Even though it's only 20 seconds and it might feel easy, I want you to go very light on these, because if you are still in the acute inflammation stage of your injury, this is going to impinge on the joint capsule and all that synovial fluid that's in there. And we don't want to have that aggravate the injury any worse. So this third and final superset, definitely go easy on it for the first week or two of this protocol until you feel like your range of motion, is very pain-free and you can push your finger in through that PIP joint without too much pain or discomfort. After that last third superset, we do the mobility component, which is very important, and this is going to be finger tendon glides. So quick tutorial on finger tendon glides. So we go just the fingertips while keeping the base straight, slowly curl in to where your comfortable limit is, slowly extend into full extension, and then we do a full curl in with the entire finger, slowly into your comfortable limit, slowly push out into full extension. Then we go the base joint only with straight fingers, comfortable limit, slowly push out into extension, and then we go the base and the middle joint, and then slowly out into full extension. That's going to be one repetition of the finger tendon glide. So it's basically a 4 movement cycle. You do 4 of those. So then rep 2, going in, and I want to very slowly control these movements. I want tension throughout my entire fingers, even as I go in and out. I feel like I'm controlling the motion with tension on all sides of the fingers. Rep 2 and rep 4. And even doing these, you kind of get a pump. So if you're getting really fatigued doing them, I would just do 3 repetitions or even 2 if you're really having issues. And then you can work your way up to 4 repetitions. Okay, now I want to talk about prevention of these finger injuries. Arguably could be the most important part of this video. If you haven't had these happen yet, it's even better to listen to this stuff. If you are dealing with them, adjusting technique, adjusting training methodology is going to be just as important as the rehab. You can really strengthen the tissue all you want. You could have the strongest tendon in the world, but if you're applying force incorrectly, you're still going to find the limit of what that tendon can hold, what that joint capsule can hold. And we really want to maximize how fast we can throw, how accurately we can throw, while minimizing the impact on the body, the negative impact. And that's what I want to talk about here. So the first part of prevention is going to be training structure and how you're going about your training sessions. So especially if you're throwing the tech disc, but also for field work. If you're throwing hard, make sure to rest between every single throw. And I know it sounds totally ridiculous because you're probably used to throwing 50 or 100 shots in a session, and sometimes you don't really feel the fatigue like you would if you go sprinted a lap at the track. But even though we sometimes can't feel the fatigue because we're so adapted to throwing backhand shots, those tissues are getting weakened a little bit. They are getting stretched out. The nervous system is getting a little bit fatigued as well. So timing could get worse. Muscles could fatigue. For example, as your glutes and core muscles fatigue, you can potentially get more stress on the fingers. So these are all just major reasons to make sure to rest between max power shots. At least 30 seconds to a minute between a max power or high power throw would be my recommendation. And then within that, total volume of high power throws. If you think about going to play at your disc golf course, your local course with a mix of par 3s, 4s, and 5s, you're not really throwing all that many maxed out, high power shots like you would in the field when you're throwing for distance or when you're pushing your power ceiling up. So that's where I think managing that high power volume per session is going to be really important. Really, I would shoot for having 2 sets of 5 high power throws with extra rest between each set. You could go up to 15 if your body feels okay, but really keep a close eye on how your leg muscles are feeling. As the legs fatigue, some of that stress is going to get transferred up to the fingers because you're going to start yanking over on the disc. So really, I would try to keep it at 10 or under max power shots per session, resting a lot between each max power session. If you're well adapted, you could go up to 15. I really would try not to push it higher than that. It's not going to be that quality anyways. If you start throwing 20, 25 max power shots, the quality of each repetition is going to suffer so much that it ends up just being a waste of time. So I really want you guys just to look out for your health and just stay injury free, because it's more fun to not be hurt. The second part of prevention is going to be throwing mechanics and technique. There's going to be a dichotomy between the type of throwing that stresses the fingers a lot versus the type of throwing that does not stress the fingers a lot. The type of throwing that stresses the fingers a lot is going to be an Anheuser Yankover archetype of throwing. So if you're falling over to the right side, this is going to be for righty throwers. If you're falling over to the right side of your throw consistently on your follow through, if you find yourself having a really rounded pull through path, or you feel a painful yank on your fingers at release, there's a good chance that you're having basically a late yank on your release pattern. This can add a couple miles an hour sometimes, but I prefer us to only leverage that when we're going for maxed out distance shots or for rollers. And the reason this causes extra stress is as the disc, so I'm accelerating it towards the target away from you guys. If I also am inducing a rightward acceleration on the disc, not only am I having to accelerate the disc in the target direction, but I'm also having to accelerate it to the right because of that extreme rounding and arcing at the end of the pull through. And so that centrifugal force of the disc's mass against my fingers is massively increasing the tensile force on my fingers and how hard they have to clamp the disc. And that's just stress that we really want to avoid. It's not necessary to throw far. And if you are throwing that way, if you're off balance, yanking over to the right, or you have a stock, Anheuser Yankover release pattern, that is going to be a lot harder on the fingers in general. Now, the antithesis of this, the most finger safe style of throwing, is going to be stacked, hyzer tilted throwing with good rear leg counterweighting. I'll put up some examples. You can look at David Wiggins, Eagle McMahon, myself on the course last few months now that my form has come together. Staying stacked over the disc and having more of a 10 o'clock push, forward and to the left with a deep pocket as well. That is going to minimize stress on the fingers because we are pushing the disc straight to the target rather than pulling the disc around towards the target and to the right. You can check out Blitz's donk drill. That's going to help you do this. You can throw one legs and hyzer tilt. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. Before I forget, I want to talk about grip. So if we're talking about the PIP joints, again, this joint right here, the one lower on the finger, generally speaking, from my experience, a power grip is going to be the hardest on that because we're in deep joint flexion and the disc is yanking out and ripping out very hard. With that being said, power grip is definitely not a death sentence for this, especially if you're doing those things I talk about with good rear leg counterweight usage, staying stacked through the release and pushing the disc straight to the target or to the 10 o'clock. You can throw power grip, all day without issues. Anthony Barella, I think he throws like everything power grip, if I'm not mistaken. And as far as I know, he hasn't had issues with his fingers despite throwing over 80 miles an hour all the time. So it really does show that technique's the most important thing. But with that being said, if you are having this issue and you want to kind of just reduce the offending exercise temporarily as you start rehabbing and getting stronger and fixing your technique, what I recommend using is something like this stacked pinch fan grip thingy. This is what Clint Blitz DG throws all his shots with. I believe Drew Gibson also throws a lot of shots like this. And I throw a lot of my shots like this too, except for high power distance drivers. So this is kind of what it looks like. So the ring finger is very protected in this position because it is between the middle finger and pinky finger. So middle finger and pinky are adding stability to that joint, that PIP ring finger joint. Middle finger, I'm not as experienced with for that PIP joint. This could also be better for the middle finger. But if you are dealing with PIP ring finger injury, this grip is going to be fantastic and still allow a lot of spin and a lot of speed. So that does it here for the PIP synovitis rehab tutorial. I really hope it helps you guys out, get pain-free and get back out there having more fun playing disc golf sooner. Was really blessed with a lot of good feedback from you guys on my last finger injury video for the DIP synovitis stuff. And it's just been really touching to see the amount of people that it helped. Now that one really is such a fast cure for that DIP issue. The PIP can be a lot more of a tedious injury. It can take longer to recover from. So if you are having PIP pain, I really recommend taking action as soon as possible. Personally, it's plagued me for probably the better part of 10 months. I rehabbed it. I also went and got corticosteroid injections at the hospital, ultrasound guided injections into it twice, which I don't recommend doing unless you absolutely have to, because that can degrade joint cartilage. But nonetheless, definitely take these things seriously, especially if it's the PIP joint. Get on it right away because it can be a huge setback. And the rehab will help you immediately, but it's still going to take a little longer to come back from than the DIP joint. So I really hope it helps you guys out. Please let me know, the kind of relief you get, if there's any critiques or adjustments that you made to the protocol to make it work better for you. I'd love to see that and hear back from you guys. And with that, I'll sign off here. So God bless you all. Hope you heal up and have a good one. We'll see you next time.